Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event in the series Poli-Talks, Get Informed Before Elections. This series is co-hosted by Kerem and Israeli Politics Simplified. Kerem is a community-focused organization based in Tel Aviv. Since the beginning of COVID, they have focused on organizing outdoor and virtual events aimed to empower and engage Olim and young professionals in the city. Israeli Politics Simplified is a Facebook page dedicated to bringing Anglos and Israel unbiased, easy to understand information about Israeli politics and the upcoming election. I'm Meira, Lerner, creator of Israeli Politics Simplified page, and I will be your host for this and upcoming events in this series. It's very easy to get confused and overwhelmed by the information overload that we see from the campaigns leading up to elections. We know that you, the voters, care about the issues and want to gain a better understanding of the political and election system and what the parties plan to do to meet your needs in the next government. This election is a truly important one, and our goal is to help you feel prepared and knowledgeable when you step into the voting booth next month. Our upcoming events will be with candidates from different parties, and the discussion will be held in a panel format. We have carefully crafted and selected questions for our candidates that really hit on some of the issues that affect most of us on a day-to-day basis. Most of our focus will be on those issues in particular. I'll be asking these questions, and my guests today will be asking follow-ups to ensure that we get a full answer and perspective. Joining me today is Aaron Shear. Aaron lives in Tel Aviv, is one of the heads of the Kerem House Policy Club, and writes for the Daily Friar. With us today is Jeremy Saltan from the Yamina party. Jeremy is number 16 on Yamina's list for the 24th Knesset and serves as Director of English Operations. Jeremy is a regular commentator for diplomatic and political panels on international networks. He serves as acting chairman of Mevaseret Zion's Immigration and Absorption Committee and as member of the Harel Planning and Construction Committee. Jeremy, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we get started, do you want to share a couple words just to tell us who you are and who Yamina is?
Sure, I'm happy to. My name is Jeremy Saltan. I'm married to Cheryl, father to Mimi, Mikey, Gabby, and Ellie. I live in Mevaseret Zion. I made Aliyah from Skokie, right outside of Chicago, Illinois, about a week before I started sixth grade. Pretty much my entire professional life, I can say, has been working on behalf of immigrants. Right after I got out of the IDF, I worked in NESTO, which stands for New English Speaking Teen Olim, which is a youth group that dealt with helping to integrate Olim from Anglo countries into Israeli society. I went up the ranks there to become the assistant director. Afterwards, joining politics, I served in a number of different roles on both the local as well as the national level. And I've been behind the scenes as a parliamentary assistant, minister assistant, faction assistant, and party employee. But in terms of immigration absorption, I'm writing my second term as the acting chairman, as you mentioned, of the Immigration Absorption Committee here in Mevaseret Zion. We have the largest of all absorption centers, until recently 1,300 spots in what used to be really the flagship program of the Jewish Agency. And of course, I've been leading Naftali Bennett's outreach to the English population for over 8 years now.
Great, thank you so much. And we're going to dive right in. So our first question has to do with the COVID pandemic. That's clearly one of the biggest issues coming out and into this election. The COVID pandemic has created an unemployment crisis, the likes of which we've never seen before. Some career fields, for example, anything in tourism and hospitality industries, are completely altered with no way of really knowing when they'll be back at full speed. What is Yamina's plan to bring people back to work and open these industries up? In addition, what small businesses are suffering and shutting down left and right? What is the Yamina's plan to combat this?
I think it's not one of, I think it's the question of the election. What do we do in terms of being able to defeat COVID, both from a health perspective, but more importantly, from an economic one? We're having this event here on Zoom for a reason. That's because we can't do it in person. We're in our fourth election in less than 2 years, but usually this isn't the setup. Usually I'm sitting in front of a bunch of people and it's a live audience. So we have to recognize that. We have to recognize that there's an 18% unemployment. And what Naftali Bennett has said very consistently is that that is what our focus is. Now, last night on Channel 12, he unveiled what he calls his Singapore plan. And the government that we hope to be able to form, and any government we're going to be a part of, is going to have this plan. This is already the 6th time that he's running in politics. He's never put a condition before when it came to forming any government. This is, of course, the first time that Naftali is running for prime minister, but he's going ahead and saying what we need to do in any coalition that we're going to be a part of, this is what needs to happen. Now, what is this Singapore plan? How are you able to go ahead and put Israelis back to work? The first thing to do is to drastically reduce the amount of income tax that we have to pay here in Israel. All of us coming from Anglo countries are well aware of the fact that looking at our paycheck, there is a lot more money going to taxes than what we're used to based on where it was in the old country. What Bennett's plan is calling for, depending on what income bracket you're in, a majority of Israelis will see between a 15 to a 20% reduction in the amount of income tax that they pay. That is a very significant reduction. Besides that, he is also calling for a reduction in the corporate tax, which is currently at 23%, and he wants to bring that down to 15%. Again, this is something that's supposed to help with what we're dealing with right now, which is a situation of a lot of people who are out of work. If you create a situation where people, employers are going to want to employ people, they're going to see that there is a system in place where it makes sense for them to be able to now hire a bunch of people, and lowering the corporate tax allows them to do that. It fosters that type of confidence. So you're able to, instead of having a situation of over the next decade, continuing down this road, this path of government bailouts, that we actually have the private sector help us be able to go ahead and take us out of this recession that we're dealing with as a result of COVID. So again, we're talking about raising the private sector at the expense of the public sector. So how do you pay for it? How is it that you're going to go ahead now and reduce the public sector? We're not calling to fire anybody, but what we are calling to do is, and there are a lot of positions like this that every year you can have disappear instantly, is make sure that positions that are no longer needed, a lot of waste, be able to make sure that no one takes over those positions. Meaning people are promoted up or they retire and then a position is vacant. We just get rid of that position instead of putting someone else in there. Someone goes on maternity leave, someone goes on extended leave. You don't bring someone else in and you don't pay for that salary during that time period. Now, what is this government waste I'm talking about? We have all these ministries that make absolutely no sense. Naftali Bennett was defense minister until about 6 months ago. Besides that, he had to deal with the intelligence minister and the minister of strategic affairs. And he had to deal with a lot of these, the minister of regional cooperation and all of these mini ministries. In this last government, we're dealing with 45 different government ministries. What we're saying is that there's no reason to have more than 22 ministers in the next government. We can reduce a lot of these positions and really deal with consolidating a lot of it. Why do we need to have a director general for Bituach Leumi, MAM, and Mas Haknasa, when really what all three of them are doing is going ahead and taking money from the citizen? You can go ahead and streamline that and make sure that's one person. And that's one position which, again, within a year, you can eliminate 2 director general positions along with their staffs and additional things. We're talking about stuff that will definitely save a lot of money. So again, we have a plan to go ahead and say that we want to increase our economy by expanding the private sector like we're used to in Anglo countries. And we want to do so by reducing the public sector, not by firing people, not by stepping on people, but by getting rid of government waste. And I just gave you a few examples of where there's plenty of government waste to get rid of. And the bottom line here is what we're talking about is going to a situation where, like they have in Singapore and like we've felt in a lot of Anglo nations, where there is a customer service mentality, where the citizen is looking to get a service from the country. And if we're able to go ahead and accomplish that, not only will we be able to come out of COVID stronger, we believe we'll be able to be in a much stronger place than we were before we entered this current situation.
Aaron, do you have any follow-ups on this?
I'm sorry, I can't hear
We
you, Aaron.
can't hear you.
I apologize. I see that you're speaking. I think they're going to deal with the technical difficulties over there, I guess.
So why don't we move on in the meantime until they can get back to us, and then we can always circle back. Our next topic is the housing crisis. It's really no secret that we have a major housing problem in this country right now. Young families all over the country would like to buy homes and settle down, and that dream is made impossible by astronomical prices, limited options in central locations, and bureaucratic processes that are difficult to navigate. Rent in many areas, especially more central locations like Jerusalem and the Merkaz area, is incredibly high, even for relatively small-size apartments. Despite programs like Meira Lemishteken, which have very specific requirements that many young home buyers don't meet and more often than not don't win, there aren't very many affordable options for people to purchase homes. What is Yamina's plan to solve this, and how would you implement it?
So one of the positions that I currently hold, and I think it's relevant to explain for answering this question, is I sit as a member of the Committee of the Planning and Construction Committee of Harel, which is a regional committee within within the Jerusalem district, where I live of Mevaseret Zion, but also dealing with various populations. If it's Abu Ghosh, which is of course a Arab town within the district, or Telstone, Kiryat Yarim, which is a Haredi town that's also within the district. So this is stuff that I deal with really pretty much on a daily basis in terms of this issue of housing and planning and zoning and how to go ahead and deal with these issues. I can tell you throughout this entire situation, especially during COVID, if we had a housing shortage beforehand, the amount of construction starts, or a lot of the ones that had already started the process but ended up being put on hold because of construction power shortages of people coming in from the territories and so on and so forth. They've created this. If it was beforehand a big issue, this is going to be one of the major issues that Israel as a society is going to be dealing with once we do get Israel back to work. What's the way to be able to solve this? There's a few things you can do. The first thing you can do is you can take the Israel Land Authority and you can privatize it. Okay, a majority of the land that is owned right now in the country is by the Israel Land Authority. And they have a system in which they're very happy to go ahead and rake up the prices. And that's what happens when you have a monopoly. That's what happens when you have one person within the market that is able to corner the market and pretty much dictate and decide to drive where the prices are going to go. Now, that's a very, very difficult thing to be able to overcome. I'll tell you again, as a member of the committee, that's not something that I can do. That's on the macro level. You need to have a lot of seats. You have to have a coalition in which you're able to go ahead and move forward on that. But the truth is, that's not a one-stop fix-all when it comes to a lot of the issues that we have. There are a lot of municipalities that are not interested in having a lot of building projects in their area for various reasons. But a lot of those reasons also do make sense. And I'll just explain this so that people understand. What you have is a situation in which the government for decades does not build enough. And then you have a gap between supply and demand. And then you have crazy prices. But then when you have a situation where you realize you want to build without creating the proper infrastructure in place to be able to withstand it. Now, you can put a bunch of people in a house, you can create a new neighborhood, but if you've not created the kindergartens, if you've not increased the classrooms in the local schools, if you've not added on additional kupot chulim, in certain cases, maybe a hospital, you are in a situation in which, and don't even start with the electrical grid or the water grid or the transportation grid, about expanding some of the roads or creating out situations in which you won't have a complete free-for-all when it comes to parking situations and so on and so forth. This is a comprehensive issue. Again, as an expert, I can tell you, it's not a simple thing. The easiest is to go ahead and privatize the land authority. When it comes down to the local level or the district level, you need to come to deals with mayors in which you're able to promise them up front that you're going to give them the infrastructure and budgets needed so that they can actually move forward and accept new apartments in their areas. That's the only way that we can move forward and build enough to deal with this gap that's between supply and demand.
Aaron, let's circle back to you. Do you want to go back to the first question, and then you can continue from there to the second?
Sure. So we had, you talked about eliminating ministries. Coalition politics, I guess it was once said, if you like laws or sausages, you shouldn't see them being made. How will coalition politics be affected by eliminating these ministries? For lack of a better word, pork, in that I give this ministry to X, I give this ministry to Y to keep all the members of my coalition happy. How will your plan affect coalition politics in Israel?
Well, it comes back to what Naftali Bennett is saying, and he's saying that we need to take all of the current, arguments that we have in the country, and we have to put them to the side, and we need to realize that what we're trying to do here is be able to create the best service possible for the citizen. Let's remember this: all the people that you guys are electing, we work for you. Okay, if I end up in the Knesset, it's not because I wanted to be in the Knesset, it's because you decided to send me to the Knesset. That's how democracy works. So what Naftali Bennett is saying is whoever wants to go into the coalition, they have to understand, they have to get with the program. If they're going to go ahead and say they want 10 ministries and they want to have a ministry of water, right? That's one of the things that we had in the last government, or they want to have, a minister of what was the macaque called of gender equality and social affairs. And you have really, with 45 ministries, you have a ministry for pretty much anything that you can think of. So yeah, if people are going to ask for this pork and whatever it is, then we're going to have a very, very tough time being able to form a coalition. But I'll tell you another thing. If we're able to get a lot of seats, okay, the amount that people are going to be able to squeeze, that's going to be greatly reduced. The more power that we have, the less pork you need to give anybody. It's very obvious. No one is going to go into a coalition without getting influence. Now, I don't think anyone really fights to be the Minister of Regional Cooperation. I happen to know a few people that used to hold that position. They end up getting that position because they want to be a minister, and that was what was left, and that's what Netanyahu gave them. Okay, I understand that, but that's not the type of government that the people of Israel want. That just because the prime minister didn't want to hurt someone's ego, we're going to go ahead and we're going to spend a couple 100 million shekel on something. That just seems ridiculous to me. Maybe to some of your viewers, they find that a little bit less ridiculous.
Aaron, do you want to have a follow-up on the housing question as well?
I'll catch up on the question after that.
Okay, great. So moving on to our next topic. Many members of our audience are Olim. We still have family living all over the world. We have seen a growing divide between Israeli Jews and diaspora Jews. Many in the diaspora, especially North American Jewry, feel disconnected to the country. They feel that Israel should be a homeland to all Jews. Therefore, their values should be reflected in the way matters concerning all Jews are handled. Is the current path one that you agree with? And which policies do you have to close this gap? In addition, many diaspora Jews are experiencing a rise in anti-Semitism and are looking to Israel to guide and help them. What is Yamina's plan to combat these issues? And what actions on Israel's side and diaspora side are the result of this?
So just a few months ago, we had the Zionist Congress. It was my honor to represent my party as a deputy delegate in that Congress. I was able to meet Jewish leaders and representatives from around the globe. Of course, the American diaspora is the largest, but I was able to meet delegates from all the various places, if it was Europe or elsewhere as well. And I'll tell you that, based on the decisions and the conversations, of course, that we had within the Congress, it's very much, at least to myself, apparent that there is a very big voice that diaspora Jewry has. And when it comes to determining various positions, if it's the Jewish Agency or Kerem Israel, or it's the Keren Yesod, or it's the Zionist, Federation organization here in Israel, and other positions, that they have a very big say, meaning it's impossible for anyone to form a voting bloc and to get anything pushed forward without having any support within the Congress of diaspora Jewry. Now, it's true that diaspora Jews do not have votes in Knesset, right? That's, of course, the way it is, I believe, in every other, not only democracy, but every other country around the globe in which only citizens get a right within the vote of the sovereign of the legislative branch. But what we have is something that's unique, which is we do have the Zionist Congress in which all Jews from all the different streams and all the different places from the four corners of the earth are able to get together and make a lot of decisions that are very relevant within Israel and throughout the Jewish community. So whenever I hear that there are people saying that they don't have any voice, especially as someone who just experienced what I did, I don't think that's accurate. They don't have a voice. Do they want to have a bigger voice? I understand that. Do they want to have good relationships? Look, there were a lot of people there that I met with that might not have agreed with me politically, but they said they wished me a lot of luck and hoped that I ended up in the Knesset because I actually listened to what they had to say. I think one of the biggest problems we have, most of the Israeli Knesset members, they just forget about the fact that they don't speak in terms of the language of English. They don't speak within the language metaphorically that a lot of diaspora Jews are speaking with, and they just don't have an audience. They don't have an address. They don't have someone to talk about. And for anyone who's seen the TV ads, one of the reasons that I'm running for Knesset is to be able to also provide an address for that. I don't think there's anyone else in any other party that said that that's something that's a priority for them. So I guess you can say in a roundabout way, me getting into Knesset could help when it comes to a lot of these issues that people are feeling within the diaspora community. You were mentioning at the end of your question there about the fight of anti-Semitism, combating anti-Semitism. Naftali Bennett was for 6 years from 2013 till 2019, he was the diaspora minister. And the unit that deals with combating anti-Semitism, it is, it still is, not was, it is in the diaspora ministry. And there's a lot of great work that's been done on that issue. I would say that, and I wouldn't say this on a majority of issues, but specifically on this issue, I don't think it makes sense to make public all of the ways that you combat anti-Semitism. There are certain things you can say publicly, but I would say that I think we did a pretty good job during the 6 years that Naftali was diaspora minister. And there's obviously always more ways to go about stuff. But in terms of things that are public and in terms of budgets that are, at least visible for people to look at, when it comes to increasing security within Jewish institutions in the diaspora that could potentially be targets, this is something that we took upon ourselves. We felt that this was a very important issue, and we budgeted that specific thing. And I know that the current diaspora minister has a different outlook in terms of how to approach this issue. But assuming that would be one of the things that we would be, moving forward on, and we would have that within the various, coalition, booty after it's all divided between everybody, I would say that we'd probably go back to a lot of the policies that we enacted back when Bennett was the diaspora minister.
Aaron, do you have anything on this?
Sure. On the topic of the United States, the largest diaspora community, in the past, Israel was a unifying topic between the Republicans and the Democrats. In recent years, it's become almost a split, where Republicans have become a pro-Israel, a perception of pro-Israel, and Democrats have become a perception of anti-Israel or less pro-Israel. And perception is reality, whether that's true or not. And we can disagree on why that is, but is there anything that that your party can do to combat the losing the Democratic Party, so to speak?
So I would say to start off, I think the mainstream of the Democrat Party is definitely still with us. I think that it's true that there are definitely elements within the Democrat Party that are not. I don't think that's a newsflash for anybody. I think that when you're looking at the four men that are running for prime minister in this election, I would say specifically the prime minister candidate whose parents were born in San Francisco and made Aliyah probably has a pretty good, what I would say, baseline in terms of treading a new course with the current administration. And let's not, pretend that he's not. Naftali Bennett is a right-wing guy. He definitely is. But he's someone who understands America. He spent many years working in America with his high-tech companies. Again, he grew up in an Anglo house. His parents were of course, American. His mother was the director of the northern branch of the AACI, right, the Association of Americans and Canadians in Israel. I think it's pretty difficult to not be as influenced as he is, when it comes to America. And I would say also he's the only one who put any Anglo or American immigrant within a shot of actually getting into the next Knesset. And besides me, after me, there's additional people on our list as well that come from Anglo or American backgrounds as well. So I think that if there's someone that could have a new conversation with the administration, would definitely be us. And I still do believe a majority of the Democrat Party have issues with what's being said by those that are in the fringe. And I think what the task is of the next administration here in Israel is to make sure that they remain on the fringe and to make sure that the mainstream continues on the path that they are right now, which I believe at least is still a pro-Israel one.
Thank you.
So continuing a little bit from that topic, the topic of diaspora Jews, there is a call to increase and encourage Aliyah of Jews from all over the world. As many of us here know, the process of making Aliyah and integrating and adjusting afterward is not a simple matter. Many times people make Aliyah and struggle to find work, adapt to the language, and ultimately they return to their country of origin because they felt that it couldn't make it work. This seems to fly in the face of the Zionist vision and values. What will Yamina do to both encourage and facilitate Aliyah and assist those who come when they get here with things like employment and housing?
So, a lot of people ask me, right, what are Ole issues, right? They ask me, what is that? Because you have a lot of Israelis, they don't understand, like, what issues are you dealing with? What's different for you than we don't have in other, countries? Before I tell you some of the stuff that I think we should do, I'll just give a few examples of what previous Anglo representatives did, what Dov Lippman did with the driver's license. For those of us who came a long time ago, we would have been very happy to see that, put in place before we came along. What Michal just did a few months ago, of course, this is before they closed down the airport, but allowing parents of, those giving birth to come and be there for their kids and their grandkids. This is stuff that when your parents live next to you, you don't realize that the call to the grandparents is from overseas and you need to bring them over. Okay. When your driver's license is something you get after you take 28 or maybe 56, depending on, which instructor you got, how many lessons. So you don't realize that there are people they've been driving for decades and they don't want to come here and they're having issues in terms of converting it. So they always say in terms of politics, once you resolve an issue, it's no longer there. So a lot of things that have been resolved, and I just gave two examples, people forget quickly. Issues that we're dealing with now that I feel are important, first of all, for all Olim, I think the issue of, first of all, in terms of Aliyah, that the Aliyah ministry is not looking to encourage Aliyah from certain countries. I think this is a problem. There are certain countries they want to encourage Aliyah from. There are other places they've pretty much said they do not want to encourage it. And I'm not going to get into which countries because I'll get very political very quickly. But I'll tell you that I think, at least the way I understood the law of return, which is one of the fundamental laws of the state of Israel, in my opinion, is that Aliyah is open to everybody and we want everybody to come here. We're not supposed to be saying, well, we want these Jews more and these Jews less. Or it might serve us a certain purpose not to work so hard to bring certain Jews over. I just reject that. Naftali Bennett, already in the first round of these 4 elections, put together a plan to be able to bring over hundreds of thousands of French Olim. And we, of course, have a French candidate in a realistic spot of number 11, Yom Tov Kalfon, a friend of mine who's an amazing guy. and he has a written plan exactly how to bring in people from France. But in terms of absorption, because we're all here, the things that just, it doesn't matter where you came from. The issues of certain degrees not being accredited here, despite these being amazing schools wherever you came from, especially from the US, this would be something that would always surprise me. We did some work on that when Naftali was education minister. We weren't able to complete that process, but we were able to get a lot of different federations of accreditation to be matched here in Israel. But there are people that went to amazing universities, they're not getting that extra bit of salary that they're entitled to. They're not able to apply for certain jobs, of course, within the public sector. These stuff is just not recognized. And I think it's crazy. Another thing is professional licensing. Now, obviously, there are issues about Israeli law or Israeli accountants or so on and so forth. But let's talk about doctors. We have a shortage of doctors in this country. The human body in Canada is the same as the human body in Israel. I'm not aware of any protectionist tariff that needs to be put in place to prevent someone from going to reputable medical school in Canada that he can't be able to go ahead and bring it here. Forget about the fact that, Canada is not the States, where in the States, obviously you'd be taking a big pay cut. But I'm saying even when it comes to Canada, you're looking at a pay cut. It's not as significant, but still big enough. And yet you have an issue, being able to bring over that professional license. And that's an area where you have a shortage of people, meaning instead of trying to go ahead and train all these people for these new jobs, you have people who are professionally trained to do the jobs. And all you have to do is be able to work on the fact of moving over and accepting the training based on where it was that they got it. And to me, again, this is just a marvelous thing that we're still dealing with these type of issues. In terms of Americans, the tax treaty back from the 70s, people dealing with issues of double taxation or bituach leumi and Social Security, people who didn't pay enough quarters into Social Security before they made Aliyah, and then they didn't have enough years working in bituach leumi, and then they end up on both ends being a diplomatic word would say, I guess, missing out in terms of getting really what they should as someone who was part of the workforce for their full, employment years. These are just a few. There's so many more. There's so many more. So one of the reasons I'm running for Knesset is to be able to resolve these issues. And this is something that I'm telling you guys, and I've been working in the corridors of power for a long time. When you are working with someone who didn't go through this, he didn't live through this, he doesn't understand those hardships, it's very difficult to have movement on these issues. And even if they agree to author a piece of legislation, they're not going to have the drive to push it through. If these are the type of things that really, speak to you, I'm really the lone hope that we have to really get this stuff through in the next Knesset.
Aaron, do you have anything?
Sure. I want to talk about public-private partnerships when it comes to Aliyah. And I'm going to give a shout out to two organizations that have personally helped me. One is Keep Olim in Israel, and one is Nefesh B'Nefesh. What is Mr. Bennett's party's plan for harnessing the power of the private and the power of the public in a sort of a, is there any chance of getting a good synergy in order to further the process of Aliyah?
So for sure, I think both of those organizations have done a lot of good. I wish there was Nefesh B'Nefesh when I made Aliyah. There wasn't, maybe if you guys want another time, I'll tell you my own personal Aliyah story. And really, Nefesh B'Nefesh and also Keep Olim also, and I've done events with them in previous elections as well. Nefesh B'Nefesh stays away from politics, of course, but Nefesh B'Nefesh, they really went ahead and they've been able to drive up the numbers when the public sector, when the Jewish agency wasn't doing their job. There are current situations, I can tell you, not just here, but whenever you have a private-public situation, where the public situation a lot of times then goes ahead and, how can I put it, shrinks away from the responsibility. Because let's be honest, the private sector always knows how to do it better. But the way the regulations are currently, okay, and I say this, and it's a very sad thing, but based on the guidelines right now that the government is giving, where Nefesh B'Nefesh needs to have a certain retention rate in terms of how many olim need to be here after 3 years and so on and so forth. There are certain, things that are in the contract, right? When you go ahead and you bring in a private company. Most likely, okay, according to the parameters they're working on, that was given to them by the government, they would have turned me away. I would have never made Aliyah, me and my family. We would have not met that criteria. And I look at the amazing things that I was able to go ahead and be able to achieve here for the people of Israel.
We froze up. Daniel.
Jeremy?
I can hear you.
I mean,
We froze up.
Oh, there you are.
You're only gonna.
He's frozen.
Jeremy, can you hear me? Jeremy?
Anyone have any jokes we want to tell?
We're a little frozen here. Jeremy, you froze.
Here, I think.
All right, you froze for a minute there.
Oh, okay. You want to tell me where I was when I froze?
You were talking about the government handing the contract to Nefesh B'Nefesh and how, the requirements were not something that a lot of people could probably pass over. Yeah.
Right. So I was saying, me myself, again, the way I understand the guidelines and the way that I've read them, I would not qualify. My family would not have qualified. So you do need to have a public option. And the reason you do need to have a public option there is because, again, the basic, sorry, it's not a basic law. One of my ideas, law of
Freezing.
Jeremy?
Give some commentary on it.
return. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. You're still frozen.
Meira, I'm frozen.
Yeah.
Let me try to.
I can hear you, but your face
Cold
is
outside.
How about now?
there. You go. You're back.
All right, I just turned off and turned down my camera. That's a little trick
Okay.
that I learned on Zoom. Someone doesn't want me to answer this question.
I think the Jewish agency killed the internet.
So I apologize, but to summarize in 2 sentences, because of the law of return, you need to have a public option. Aliyah needs to be an address for everybody. You have a lot of private organizations, not just with America, but also with American Nefesh B'Nefesh, of course, where they're doing great work. But if you're going to have a private option to help you out, the public option still needs to exist for those that are not within the parameters of the private option.
All right, great. So we're moving on to a question that I'm hoping that you, given your background, could probably give us a little bit more insight into than others might be able to. Since the start of the pandemic, a lot of attention has been given to the municipalities and whether they should be given more power to make decisions regarding lockdowns and regulations for their own citizens. Many of the country's mayors have called for handing the reins over to them, expressing their greater understanding of the needs and capabilities of their own neighborhoods and citizens. What are your feelings on this matter? Would Yamina support a move in this direction? And what would you do to implement that? Which specific powers would you give a municipality that is currently federal?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. It's part of the plan that Naftali Bennett has in terms of COVID on a health perspective. What we've had until now is we had just national shutdowns and that was it. And then we went to the traffic light method, in which we have red areas and orange and yellow and green. And pretty much the idea has been, let's close off the red area. What Naftali Bennett says is, let's do the complete opposite. Let's go 180. Let's close off the green area. And I'll explain how this, talks about the municipalities and giving them the power, because they're really the key to being able to make this work. And it comes from a lot of mayors asking for these specific things and these powers. Naftali explains it's like cleaning the room for Pesach, okay? Those of us who have ever done that. If you have a room and you want to clean it for Pesach,
It's frozen.
Yeah.
We're talking about cleaning the room for Pesach.
Cleaning your face off.
Sorry.
Okay, there you are.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
know. I saw one out there for a minute.
Okay.
So I said you clean each room, until each room is clean. You don't bring the chametz into the rooms that are clean, and that's how you clean. He said it's the same thing with Corona. Let's instead of closing off the red areas, let's close off the green areas. How do you make an area green? You go to each mayor. We have right now the capacity to do 2 million. This is amazing. 2 million Corona tests a day. We're not doing that for various reasons. If you want, you can ask me why later. But we have the ability to go to the mayors and say, here's a bunch of tests, test your entire community. They know how to do it a lot better than the national government does, because the local government knows their own area. You can isolate all of the cases that have Corona in their homes, or if need be, in Corona hotels, not in the Benny Gantz motels, which promotes people to go ahead and try to skip the system and find a loophole, but like the 5-star hotels that Bennett had when he created the system back when he was defense minister. And what you do with this system by allowing the mayors to have this control over their city, they're able to clean it very quickly. And then no one from red cities can go into the green cities. And that's much easier to implement versus trying to just stop the green people from going into the red cities and then back to the green city and then making it red. I can tell you, as someone who lives in Mevaseret, we were, for a long time, a sea, there was a sea of red, and we were an island of green where Jerusalem was red and Abu Ghosh was red and Telstone was red and Mevaseret in the middle was green, until everyone started doing their shopping by us and spending all their time by us, and they ended up, making us, then go yellow and then orange. So what you need to do is you have to isolate the green cities as opposed to the red cities. You then have a competition between the cities because everyone wants to be the one who gets rid of Corona first. Let's explain what that means to be a green city. Not a green city the way that it is right now. A green city in terms of everything's open. Tourism's open, everything within that particular area. So what you have is a situation, even in Bnei Brak and those areas that are red, they're going to look around and see next to them in Ramat Gan, in Givatayim, that it's pretty good there, that everyone is going to work and having a good time and there's no restrictions, and they're going to want to take part in that too. So it might take some time, but eventually what this does is it gives you incentives. It makes you want to go ahead and go green, as opposed to just continuously expecting that sanctions is going to be what is going to convince people to suddenly go ahead and change their minds. Because if we've seen anything over the last year, it's that whatever the government's been trying to do to convince people to listen, they have failed in being able to accomplish that task.
Aaron, do you have anything to follow up on?
Good for now, thank you.
Great. So we're going to be turning away to education. We have a lot of parents that are tuning in for this event, and many of them are concerned about our current education system. Over the years, there have been many plans to change how education is approached in this country. There are a few areas in particular that parents would like to see addressed. For example, there is a massive disparity between the amount of vacation days the education system has and the amount of vacation days the business sector and working parents have. This puts a huge strain on parents. Another focus area is curriculum and what it is that we are teaching our children. Some feel that more curriculum decisions should be made by school principals, and that curriculum and education focus should move away from learning for tests and more towards experiential learning, life skills, and general knowledge. What is Yamina's stance on these issues, and what is the plan to implement any changes you'd like to see made?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question, or I should say, a series of questions on education. I might ask you to come back to some of those.
Sure.
I want to make sure I get all of that stuff in because it's very important. Look, what it comes down to in education is that needs to be the priority of what we're doing here. If you're not going ahead and investing in the next generation, then what's the point of society? I can tell you, when Naftali was education minister, he made a lot of these changes that I felt were very much needed. Number one was, at least when I went to school here, what was most important was the Bagrut. That was it. It was always Bagrut. And there was nothing else that mattered. What he did was he created a new system in which there was a series of different things that schools are measured on. He felt you need to have other parameters. For instance, and I remember this in some, and I'm sure a lot of us remember people who went to various schools. They would kick people out or not send people to the bagrut to keep certain percentages. So he went in, he put all these parameters. He wanted to know how many people are doing 5 units in math, right? How many people are dropping out of the school? How many people are in the school but not being sent to do any bagriyot? He went in, and I'm saying that's just within that one, area, but he put on a bunch of other areas. He felt that there are also, value-based things that we have to put into the curriculum. We're talking about the autonomy of the principals. That's something that he tried to increase. It's not an easy thing to be able to do that. For people who don't know, the education ministry is the second largest in the country after the defense ministry. And you have some pretty strong unions there that you have to deal with. In terms of vacation and the gap between the working people and teachers. Look, it was him that started this whole thing of Bet Sefer Shel HaChugim, which I'm sure you guys remembered from the Bennett times. We're not having that now. We're not really having school now, depending what ages your kids are. But this concept, and I remember they all thought he was an idiot and this wouldn't work. But going ahead and creating special days within the vacation break, where there was a school, there was the school within the vacation time on school premises, many times with the same teachers, but maybe sometimes with substitutes and so on and so forth, but being able to work on dealing with this gap. And then of course, depending on the socioeconomic level of the city, the payment would end up being something that would be a lot better. Sorry,
she asked me if I want to move on.
Aaron, are you asking me something?
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. I thought there was a follow-up in the middle there. So again, when it comes to a lot of these issues, if it was going ahead and having different parameters beyond just grades are important. We like grades, but you have to have other parameters. And of course, we want to go ahead and stop, people from dropping out. We want to have more value-based curriculum. Of course, we want to see all of the curriculum be able to move forward, but you want to have value-based. On the same side, you want to have the certain areas which everyone agrees are most important moving forward on. Look, the 5-unit math program that Naftali Bennett put forth, people forget about this, but there were a bunch of cities across the state of Israel. There were 0 students in any given year taking 5 units. And it wasn't because people were not as smart in the north or in the south or in certain settlements and in isolated places. It was just that they weren't offering it. They weren't offering it because the way the parameters worked, it was in their benefit to send everyone to the lowest units possible. So, and this goes back, in many ways to the Singapore program. What you want are ministers that are going ahead and setting goals and parameters that make sense so that you're able to move forward, whether it's in education or health, the economy or wherever it is, so that you're in a place where you feel as a citizen that you're getting a service for the money that you're paying in taxes. So I hope I covered all the aspects of that question, Meira.
I think so. I think we also want to move on to more questions. I know that we're running out of time. So this is one that we definitely don't want to dwell too long on this, but we do feel it's important to bring up, at least in brief, which parties would Yamina not sit with? Are there parties that you wouldn't sit with? I know I've heard Naftali comment on this a little bit, but is there anybody really that would not have any place in a coalition with Yamina at this point?
So I'll try to be as quick as possible on this, right? So we can talk more about issues, but I know everyone loves the horse race and the politics and the end game. Look, any party that is accepting Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, they're a partner to have coalition talks. You know how coalition talks start, you don't know how they end. But in terms of being able to invite them, anyone who accepts Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, but also they have to accept the Singapore plan. They have to be able to be willing to put aside all of the right-left divide questions, because if we're going to have these right-left arguments, frankly, after 4 elections in 2 years, we're going to have a 5th election and 6th election, and we're going to keep doing this forever and ever and ever. And in terms of, what's going to be the follow-up question of, Bibi or not Bibi or Lapid or Sar or whatever. So I'll just already, save you the trouble and tell you
It
now.
actually wasn't going to be a follow-up question.
Oh, well, I'm assuming Aaron was going in that direction. Am I wrong, Aaron?
I could.
You could. Well, I'll save it for a different follow-up then. I'll tell you very bluntly, there are four
Read my
people.
mind, but
There are four people. There are four people that are running for prime minister, and Naftali Bennett is one of those four people. We have a three-phase process to choose our prime minister. We get to vote as citizens. We vote for the legislative branch, which is the Knesset, and we're running for prime minister. We're telling everyone who wants us, who thinks that's the best candidate for prime minister, and we have the best list, to vote for Yamina, which is Bet. In the second phase, you have the president's residence. All of the parties that pass the threshold send their delegation. No matter what, we're going to nominate Bennett. We're not going to nominate anybody else. We're not going to nominate Bibi. We're not going to nominate Lapid. We're only going to nominate Bennett in the president's house in terms of a nomination for prime minister. What's going to be in the third and final phase, which is the confidence vote in the Knesset that needs to produce a government, and what's going to happen between the president's residence and that confidence vote? We're very clear that we're going to wait to see how it all falls out. We want to know what happens in terms of what the actual votes are, how much strength you guys gave us in the public. We want to know where the nominations fell in the president's residence. And we're not going to commit ourselves in terms of the third phase, because what we've seen over the last 2 years are people who promised what they were going to do in the third phase, and all of them ended up turning out to be wrong. People promised they were going to sit with Bibi and didn't. People promised they weren't going to sit with Bibi and they did. So what we can do is we can commit to what it is that we know. We are supporting Bennett in the first phase and in the second phase. If we don't have enough power to do it in the third phase, and we really hope that, again, in that third phase, it's us. But if we don't have enough support, we'll figure it out then.
Okay, so moving on, totally different topic then, because that seems to be pretty covered. Israel has a huge pollution problem. From Haifa's air quality to trails and campsites turning into litter pits to a huge consumption of plastics and disposables, Israel is not an example of startup nation when it comes to environmental policy. During his English-speaking interview, Gideon Saar, I know not Yamina, but he was asked a written-in question by Kerem House co-founder Daniel Elbogen, what are your plans for the environment? So we ask you, what are Yamina's plans for the environment? And environmental change, it should come from education and cultural change. What are your plans for each of these to improve our environment?
Yeah, I mean, just before I answer that question, I also watched that event. I think it's unfortunate that he said he wasn't going to answer that question. Another question that I was asked, he said he wasn't going to take a position on that issue. I frankly feel if you're running for prime minister, you should have a position on all of the issues. You should. And if someone asks you a question, if they're a voter, you should give them an answer, even if it's an answer they don't like. That's just the way that I feel. In terms of the environment, this morning, Amichai Shikli, who's number 5 on our list, he went to Herzliya and he was part of the cleanup effort to be able to deal with the whole situation that happened as a result of the whale. I'm sure all of you, or at least those that the environment is important to you, are well aware of what happened in that situation. And I know that he led that effort. I think there were a few other people from the party that joined him. I'm happy to send pictures. I mean, it's maybe not the most pretty pictures to send, but we were part of that cleanup effort in terms of today. And that is, one of the things that is important when we're thinking about long term. But like I said, the main issues we're dealing with are definitely COVID from a health perspective and an economic perspective. I'm not running away from the environment. Like I said, we were on it this morning. But if this is the number one thing that you guys are looking for, and you want a written platform of 20 pages on the environment, I don't have 20 pages to give you. I can tell you, the basic guidelines are that we're for the government. We're for the environment. We're in a situation where we realize that there's various things happening that need to be dealt with. And we just want to make sure that we get through the next month and the next few months, and we get the economy, back on track before we go ahead and put the more, emphasis on the environment, which we're hoping will still be around at least 6 months down the line.
Aaron, do you want to add anything to
Good to go.
that? Okay. So we want to take this in another direction now. This is a little bit of a different field. Rabbanut certification is seen by many businesses as many things from an inconvenience to a scam. The stories of bribes are abundant. These state-sanctioned systems in marriage, death, and especially kosher food certification make life difficult for private citizens and business owners alike. If the state mandates the use of these departments, shouldn't they be free to their citizens? We want to ask, A, would you be open to standardizing the workflow and workforce to clean up and regulate these departments? And B, would you be open to making kosher certification state-sponsored and not the responsibilities of the food industry?
You know, I think, and I've said this before, at least with the environment, I would like to think that we could get a common denominator across the parties to be able to make movement on that issue. I really don't think that there's a lot of movement that we can make on those type of issues when it comes to the next government. And that doesn't matter in terms of who the various coalition partners are. I think, you know, as you said, that's a very, how can I put it? It's a,
Jeremy, can you hear me?
Yes. What am I
Jeremy,
doing?
you are frozen.
Okay.
He's trying to come back in. Jeremy, you there?
What just happened?
Whenever his internet drops.
Okay.
can you
Jeremy?
hear me now?
Yes, now you're back. Nope, you're gone again. Jeremy?
Shas muted him.
All right, about now?
We hear you, we don't see you.
You hear me but don't see me. Let me try the trick with
No,
the
no, we see you
camera.
again. We see you again. You're
Now
back.
you see me again. And again, I apologize to everyone for the technical difficulties, but luckily we've all been going through this all year, so you guys understand me a little
We're
bit
all
better.
used to Zooms and virtual things.
Like I said, I wish this was in person, and then I wouldn't have to deal with this stuff. But again, I do apologize, even though it's not my fault directly. I do apologize for the technical difficulties. I appreciate you guys sticking around. I said that it's a situation in which, regardless of whatever coalition you're going to form, people have very strong positions on this issue. With COVID being the main topic that you're going to try to get cooperation on, I think it's going to be very difficult to see movement on these type of issues. I think people who know me personally, I think people who know Naftali Bennett and know his record, know that you know where we are on the spectrum in terms of you know a lot of these issues. But I just do not expect to see any movement on any of this stuff over the next government, regardless of whatever government is formed. I just frankly don't see it. I think it's important to tell that to the voter. You know, I've heard, you know, Lapid talking about all these different things that he's promising. He has this new campaign ad where he promised all these things that I don't see one of those things being accepted by the coalition that he would need to build in order to form a government. So I'm just being honest here.
All right, that's fair. Aaron, do you want to add something?
You just answered my question.
Okay, great. So we want to talk a little bit more about city issues, and a little bit heading into the environmental space as well. Cars are expensive, environmentally destructive, and in city centers, there's no parking. Furthermore, cities like Tel Aviv are phasing out parking spaces in favor of walkways, biker and scooter lanes as well. What are your plans to make us less reliant on cars?
So, you know, I was saying before, I'm in the planning and building committee. And one of the things that we're actually, you know, on Wednesday, we have a big meeting. We put 4 to 5 hours aside just to talk about parking. Okay. You know, if you live in Modi'in, there's plenty of parking, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or even, you know, places like Mevaseret now, there's an increasing issue in which you're not able to find a place to park your car, and you have to figure out what it is that you have to deal with it. So I know this is an issue that a lot of people are dealing with. And as you mentioned, there's additional issues such as the environmental ones as well. What we think is something that could definitely help is to be able to really improve our public transportation system. That's something that we haven't heard a lot from a lot of the parties. That's probably because they don't take the bus or the train. One of the things that I love doing when I was a parliamentary assistant is I would take 2 buses in to work. And there were very few, members of parliament that would take, the bus in with me. But I always felt that I'd have some really good conversations with people, but I'd also be able to be on the pulse in terms of the various issues that people have. Now, right now, for me to get to the Knesset, I already need 3 buses, not 2 buses, from where I am. And look, it's just getting more and more difficult, right?
Yeah.
The fast train between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem goes right through Mevasseret, but it has no train stop because of internal political fights of the mayor of the time, along with the transportation minister at the time. There are a lot of ways to be able to deal with these type of issues. The way to be able to have real accomplishments in these issues are to have ministers who actually understand the issues, who actually care about it, and are upfront in terms of what the objectives they have in terms of being able to go ahead and accomplish it. Right now, I really don't see anyone talking about, again, public transportation or any sort of thing. Look, we would all love for us to go back to the cartoons of the Jetsons and just fly to work. But we have to, realize that at least right now, as much as you want to promote all these other types of alternatives, you do have a thing called public transportation, and you do have an ability to make it a lot better than it is now. I do not think, I'll say as a consumer, I don't think it's very good right now. I think most people who take public transportation agree with me on that. And I don't think you can blame people for getting, a second car or a third car in their family when the public transportation is as bad as it is right now. So I think that's the key to success.
All right, we're going to move on to our last prepared question, and then Aaron is going to have a little bit of time for some follow-ups that I know that he has. Mixed zone spaces with shops on the bottom floors and apartments on the top reduce the need for cars and travel in general. Yet aside from Gindi Towers in Tel Aviv and a few other examples, zoning in Israel prevents builders from building mixed zone structures. What are your plans to change zoning to allow for new construction?
So I can tell you, actually, Mevasseret, in the new neighborhood that we approved, we did just that. And you're right, it's difficult to zone that, but when you have people who actually know what they're doing, right, like me, at least that's how I define myself, within positions of power, and you have to make decisions, you're able to make these type of things that make a lot of sense. I can tell you there was a lot of resistance. There were a lot of people who didn't think we should go in that direction in terms of the committee. That's what we ended up doing in Mevasseret, and I think it's very good. You mentioned in other places they've done it. We should do this in more places. Look, if we end up having the housing ministry, which is something that I would love for us to have, okay, if we have the housing ministry in Yamina's hands when we form the next government, these are the type of policies that you can for sure expect to see moving forward. Again, I looked in terms of other parties. I don't really see them talking about it. And at least I can tell you in terms of, I looked in terms of the district and regional areas, I think in terms of planning and building committee members, I'm the only one that's running, again, within a shot of getting to the next Knesset who actually knows, who actually deals with these issues. And just so you understand, in terms of zoning, you have so many things, right? One of the issues you have with the housing shortage, you have all these lawyers' houses, lawyers' offices in houses, right? Lawyers' houses. Maybe they live there too, but no, they don't. You have the dentists that are using housing. You have all the barber shops that are in housing. One of the great ways that you can go ahead and actually be able to reduce the price of housing is make sure that the stuff that is zoned as housing is actually used for housing. I know this sounds like a crazy thing because we're talking about it and being able to use the same space to use multi-zoning. Let's go back to actually using the actual zoning that we decided in the zoning committee. That'd be a great idea. But obviously, in terms of new areas, this is something we have to be able to do moving forward.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. Aaron, I'm gonna hand it over to you. You can ask your follow-ups.
Sure. It's a little off topic, but not really. It was talking about the rule of law.
Yeah.
specifically in the Negev. Lately, there's been a disturbing trend of lawlessness in the Negev, to include theft of weapons from IDF bases, property crime, crime on the road. And it's sort of gone unnoticed until recently. It started to pop up disturbingly. Does your party have a plan to address this?
Yes, we do. In the previous term from 2013 till 2018 in Mevaseret, I was in the Defense Committee. Obviously, we're not dealing with, big terrorist issues in Mevaseret, thank God, but we are dealing with the police. And I can tell you from talking to a number of, chiefs of police that went through my 5-year term, they don't have the resources that they need to get things done. In terms of policemen per capita to citizen, out of all Western democracies, we're last place. So we have a situation we rely a lot on our army. We do not rely a lot on our police in terms of personnel or resources. So when we're dealing with the situation in the South, and this is something that our party has spoken a lot about over the last couple of weeks since it has gone into the news, is that we need to have an actual, how can I put it, change in the way that it is approached. Until now, Netanyahu and the government will not recognize that there is a problem. The first thing you need to do is recognize there's a problem. The second thing you need to do is you need to go to the people on the ground and give them the resources that are needed. There are various things. Look, one of the things is to change the rules of engagement when you're dealing with these type of people who, again, have the type of firepower of terrorist organizations, not of criminal, B&Es, okay? So you have to be able to give them the resources and the ability to be able to treat it as it is. One of the things that we talked about is being able to bring in the border police, Magav, into these areas. This is something the government won't do. They say that they don't want to do this. The border police is a police unit. This isn't bringing in the military, but they're people that are trained to deal with these exact types of populations. In fact, it is the border police that deals with the Bedouins on the Egyptian fence, right? So, and many times it's the same Bedouin tribes. Okay, you're talking about the same people, but they're being told that because they're dealing with them in a different place, they can no longer deal with it. It becomes an internal Israeli police matter, as if, again, the border police aren't wearing Israeli police uniforms, which they are. And Naftali Bennett has even said, if all of these things don't work, we can't rule out the possibility of, if needed, and hopefully we don't need to, and I don't think we will, but just so they know that we mean business, and so that the people of the South feel safe, that they know that in terms of putting stuff on the table, if necessary, then it's possible we'll have to examine and consider the option of bringing in the military to deal with it, if bringing in the resources and the capabilities and bringing in specialized police units to deal with it. Because it's a crazy situation. The story of the rape of the 10-year-old girl is horrendous. When you're seeing about the amount of ammo that's being stolen from IDF bases, how can the IDF not be able to respond to that when it's being taken from an IDF base? I mean, you just hear the testimony of these people. It's very difficult. I'm very disappointed. The government is doing everything possible to be able to try to table this and silence this. I don't think that's the way to be able to deal with the situation. If anything, talking about it, identifying that it's an issue, that's the first step to actually being able to combat it and then defeat it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Aaron, you have another one?
No, thank you. I answered everything I had.
Oh, okay.
I answered all of your questions.
Well, I could ask you questions about the comedy industry, or
yes. I don't know how many the people listening to the Facebook Live want to hear answers to that, but I'm happy offline to give you.
Thank you. I'm good.
Sure.
So then, you know what? Let's circle back to another question that we had. This is still more in the realm of education and also jobs. More and more universities seem to provide less value and job assurance. As new jobs are created, more of the workforce is having a hard time. What are your plans to update what is taught in academia and to train and retrain the older and unskilled workforce?
One of the things that Naftali did when he was economy minister from 2013 to 2015 is he wanted to get a screenshot. He wanted to get a picture of the Israeli economy. So he did this professional study in which he found out two things. Number one, where are all Israelis working in terms of sectors? And second, where are the needs for people to actually be able to learn? And he noticed, for instance, that we have the most lawyers per capita than any country around the globe. Of course, we're Jewish lawyers, I get it, but seriously, it was crazy amount. Versus the fact that even though engineering is something that should be one of the things we're good at, we're very low in engineers. And those are just two options, but we saw a lot of different things. What he did is he went to the areas that have traditionally low employment rates, and that's the Haredi and the Arab populations, particularly the Haredi men, because the Haredi women work usually more than the Haredi men do, and the Arab women, because traditionally they work less than the Arab men. And he created specialized professional training centers in which he was able to train people, not for any job, but specifically for the type of jobs based on the survey that we did, that we have holes within the economy that we need filled. And again, this comes from an approach of someone who's not just putting his finger out in the air and following polls. This is someone who's not reactive. This is someone who's taking the initiative. So in terms of professional training, that's the way to go about it. In terms of education and being competitive there, I'll tell you an important thing that he did, and that was making the first private university in Israel. Now it's known as Reichman, before it was known as the IDC. This was something that no one ever tried to do before. But now that you have a private option, besides the 9 other options you have in terms of the public options, and there's no reason right now to name them, but you have now this other private option that creates competition in which people realize they need to up their game. So if you're able to, both in the formal education along with the professional training, and the third level of it is informal education, and we put a lot of money into that, investing, if it's Hatzofim, the Israeli Scouts, or B'nai Akiva, or the various other youth groups. And again, as someone who's a veteran of a youth group, I can tell you, they are really instrumental in terms of creating the character and fostering really, the soul of a youth and turning them into a great citizen and a great individual. That's the way to do it. That's the recipe. If you're able to go ahead and continue on these things, you'll be able to have results. Before and after him, no one was able to go ahead and privatize any university. Before him and after him, no one went ahead and did a survey to see where is the Israeli market, where is the current, both in terms of where people are and where they should be, and came up with a plan to close that gap. And again, we put more money into informal education than our predecessors and those that succeeded us. I think you put those 3 together, you have the recipe for success.
Great. Aaron, you have one last question?
Sure. This is a melding of 2 topics that you brought up. One was the willingness to work with anyone who accepts Israel as a democratic Jewish state, which essentially eliminates the joint list because it's a coalition of a Stalinist organization, a Nasserist organization, and an Islamist organization. Additionally, you noted that the outreach to the Arab community in the areas of education. Is there a unified outreach to the Arab community that would circumvent the joint list and go directly to the Arab community? Is there something that the Bennett party can offer the Arab community that the joint list is not offering them?
For sure. Again, when I'm in the committee and I have, just for those of you who don't know the way these type of committees work, if you want to close off your Mirpeset, you want to put in a new pool, I'm not just creating new, I'm also creating new neighborhoods and cities, but when people need actual issues to deal with their own houses, they're going to the same committee. It's not different people that you're sitting in front of and trying to win over. I'm all the time dealing with their population. Like I said, Abu Ghosh is under my jurisdiction. I'll tell you, and I have a lot of friends there. I work with the mayor there. I work with members of the city council over there. My good friend Ali, who also sits with me in the committee, he invited me over, to take part in his child's wedding, and that was a very interesting experience. I'm not used to people, shooting their gun off at at a wedding, but they made sure to warn me ahead of time and let me know they weren't shooting at me before they did. It was very courteous of them. But I'm saying, just because we're from different cultures doesn't mean that we can't go ahead and get along and be able to live here together in the same country. What we have is a situation where you have representatives, for instance, from Balad, who are just working against us. Where it seems like a job in Balad is what you do right before you end up in jail, right? I come from Chicago, Illinois, and they used to joke, the prerequisite to getting in jail in Illinois is to be governor, right? Because there was like a bunch of successive governors. So it's the same thing, with Said Nafa and Ratas, and of course Bashara, who needs to go to jail, but he ran away. He's right now, touring whatever enemy of Israel wants to take him in at whatever given time. So again, it's very difficult. And again, for people who don't know, Azmi Bashara, he gave coordinates of where Hezbollah should kill the most civilians possible during the Second Lebanon War. Okay, so yeah, look, I don't think that the representatives that we're seeing in Knesset being chosen by the Israeli Arab population necessarily have any connection or correlation with at least the members of the Arab community that I meet, that I deal with. And a lot of times when I ask them why it is they're going for the joint list, it's just because they feel that they don't have any other choice, or there's no one else that represents them, or so on and so forth. But they respect their local leadership a whole lot more than they respect their national leadership. And there's a reason why the percentage and the turnout in their villages are always much higher in the local elections than the national elections, because those are the people that really, really represent them. And I'm telling you, as someone who has bridges with that community, that's what we need more of. We need more of just connections with people on the regional level, on the local level, and to just wait for them to choose a better national leadership that is more representative of what I believe their values are in terms of the people that I've met personally.
We're just about out of time. So Jeremy, do you have any last thoughts that you want to leave us with?
Sure. If you liked what you heard tonight, the really, as I said, already a couple times, the only way for me to get into Knesset and the only way for Naftali Bennett to be prime minister is if you guys go ahead and you vote for us. We're called Yamina. Our letter is Bet, and I would really, really love it if you guys gave me the power to help you. And what I'm going to be is accountable to you. If you guys don't like my work, at the end of the term, you guys can fire me. That's the way that this works. What I'm asking you guys to do is to put faith and trust the one party that's trying to put you guys first over all these other parties that are saying they're going to represent you without actually going ahead and putting together a representative. If you have any other questions, feel free to send it to us at NaftaliBennettEnglish@gmail.com. One more time, that's NaftaliBennettEnglish@gmail.com. And please vote Bet in the Kalpi.
Jeremy, thank you so much for being with us. Aaron, thank you for joining me and pitching in with these questions. You definitely brought another perspective that I think is very appreciated. And thank you to all our audience for tuning in. If you liked this talk and you want to see more like it, please be sure to follow Kerem House and Israeli Politics Simplified on Facebook to hear more about our upcoming events in the Poli-Talks series. We actually already have a couple booked, so stay tuned and pay attention to those pages to get more details. Thank you all and good night.
Thank you, Meira. Thank you, Aaron.